Hello, welcome to Italics, the Italian-American magazine. I'm your host, Anthony Tamburri. On Saturday, March 25, 1911, 146 people, mostly young teenage immigrant women working as seamstresses, died in the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire in Greenwich Village in New York City. A conflation of poor working conditions, coupled with obsolete and inadequate firefighting equipment, led to a scene of such horrific loss of life that only an event as devastating as the 9/11 terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center rivals it. This month on Italics, we'll take you to the official ceremonies and observation of the centenary of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire at the Brown Building in Greenwich Village, the site where it occurred 100 years ago.
We gather today 100 years after when 146 immigrant workers were burned to death. And if you look up at those windows and see the purple banners, those were the windows out of which dozens of young women garment workers ages 14 to 25 were forced to jump out of those windows and be crushed to death on the sidewalk. We honor their memory, and we come together to remind ourselves that those workers were fighting for their rights to have a union in that workplace and the right to be treated with dignity and respect. I want to introduce the first speaker in today's program, and that is the Secretary of Labor of the United States of America.
Today, only steps away from the Triangle factory, we remember the lives of these workers. We honor them for the high price that they paid for the protections that you and I enjoy today. We are reminded that we must always protect our most vulnerable workers. We must provide safeguards and a safety net for all workers. And yes, we must ensure that all workers have a voice at the table. We must be a nation that catches all workers before they fall. And that's what I bring to you today with the respect and support of our President, Barack Obama. Today, as we commemorate the lives of the 146 workers who lost their lives in Triangle, we must also remember the 29 coal miners that perished in the explosion in the Upper Big Branch mine in West Virginia almost a year ago on April the 5th. Or we need to remember the 11 workers killed in the Deepwater Horizon explosion in the Gulf Coast. Or the construction worker who is injured or dies every single day. They are all modern reminders of work we still have to do, and the very reasons why we can't stop fighting until every worker is safe and has a good and safe job. Workers need a voice about wages and benefits, but they need more help too. When workers have a voice, their working conditions are better and their workplaces are safer. The bottom line is that unions have helped to ensure that all Americans have the opportunity to achieve the middle class. Let us continue to honor the dead and fight like hell for the living. Thank you, and God bless
you. The next speaker represents the largest union in the United States of America, the largest union in North America. It's a union of 2.2 million healthcare workers, janitors, public sector employees, and private sector manufacturing and distribution workers. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce the president of our international union, Mary Kay Henry.
And as I look at those shirtwaists, I think of the two owners of this factory that got the call that the fire was blazing and quickly escaped themselves to safety without notifying anyone in the building, where they could have made sure that everyone got out safely. So as I look at these shirtwaists, I feel sorrow, but mostly I feel indignation at the injustice that those women had to jump to their death when they could have been saved. And those women were part of a movement of garment workers in this city that we want to pay tribute to today, who mobilized at the turn of the century to fight for their rights, to demand a decent wage, to support their families, a safe workplace, an end to child labor, and acceptable work hours. These women changed the face of this city and our nation by demanding the type of dignity that goes by one name: union. There is an old union song that an earlier generation of garment workers used to sing, and it goes like this. Freedom never came like a bird on the wing, never came down like rain in spring. Freedom, freedom, what a hard-won thing. You've got to work for it. You've got to fight for it, day and night for it. And every generation has to win it again.
A year before they were killed, these same women and girls marched and agitated for their rights. They joined 20,000 fellow garment workers in a citywide strike. They tried to organize. They tried to alert America to the horrors of the workplace. But America was not ready to listen. And then came the fire. 100 years ago, today, people leaping out of the building to escape the flames. It was a jarring drop kick to the American conscience. The phoenix that rose out of the ashes of the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire was a clarion call to action. It supercharged the American labor movement and emboldened activists and lawmakers alike to push forward with landmark workplace safety laws, child labor laws, and most of all, collective bargaining rights. These laws and these rights have saved millions of workers from injury and from death. Throughout history, we have seen that union membership, combined with hard work, is the most effective vehicle for the expansion of the middle class in our history. But today, some on the far right want to rob workers of their hard-earned collective bargaining rights. They seek to fray the social safety net under the false pretense of fiscal austerity. Today, ladies and gentlemen, those hard gains are under threat across the United States by those who want to drag our nation back to 1911, when there was precious little oversight and regulation and virtually no worker protections. We saw this kind of power grab in Wisconsin, where Governor Walker pushed ahead with not only limits on pension and health benefits, which the union leaders agreed to, but a near total elimination of collective bargaining rights. Well, I say to you this: Walker may have won the battle, but he's going to lose the war. That is because the American people do not want to go back to 1911, when workers had no rights. The American people have not forgotten the lessons of the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire. So today, we not only commemorate the 100th anniversary of one of the greatest tragedies in American history, we celebrate the progress that has been made since. and to the families of the victims, many of whom are here today, I want you to know we will not let right-wing ideologues and Scott Walker Republicans undo your loved one's legacy. Stand up, be counted, be heard. We must not, we will not let those dark forces return us to the days of this horrible tragedy. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.
I want to introduce another great leader of New York City workers. That's the president of 1199 SEIU, George Gresham, the president of 1199.
The shame is if today, 100 years later, we still have that corporate greed that wants to take advantage of working people. The shame is that we, as working people in this country, are being pointed out as the problem, that we don't recognize the corporate greed that exists today. It is not just for us to look back 100 years ago and say it was corporate greed that killed these women. We have to recognize the corporate greed that we're seeing against working people today. And we, if we truly want to honor the legacy of these workers, we cannot let the Scott Walkers get away with what they're trying to do with working people in this country today. Tell me when have working people become the problem in this country?
I would like you to pay close attention to a story that you will hear for the first time out of the mouth of a worker who's been exploited by contractors and developers out there thinking that they will get rich on the backs of immigrant workers, thinking that there's no one around to give them a lending hand. But we want to send a message to those developers and contractors that there are unions, there are politicians, and there are people in Washington watching every step you take. And when we catch you, we're going to prosecute you to the extent of the letter of the law. And I'd like you to present to you someone who his story is going to move your heart, and you're going to put a question mark, thinking, wow, we're in 2011. Is it really, really happening out there? Well, yes, it is.
Hace 2 años conseguí un trabajo en el proyecto de Letier Construction.
Approximately 2 years ago, I obtained a job in the project of Letier Construction.
Me pagaban en cash y no me pagaban las horas extras.
I was being paid in cash and no, not being paid for the extra hours.
A veces pasaban varias semanas para que me pagaran.
Sometimes there were several weeks before I was being paid.
No tenía beneficios.
Had no benefits,
Ni seguro médico,
no medical insurance,
ni pensión,
no pension,
y nada.
nothing.
Solo me pagaban $13 por hora cash.
I was only being paid $13 an hour cash.
Cuando trabajaba, las puertas eran cerradas con candado.
When we worked, the doors were locked with a padlock.
no había baños y no nos permitían salir.
There were no bathrooms, and we were not allowed to leave the site.
And on this day, I remember words spoken by a great and wise man, Nelson Mandela. It was just a few months after 9/11, and standing on the steps of City Hall, Mandela said, "Sometimes the sorrow of a great tragedy brings out the true strength of the community." And we know that's true about our community, New York. We showed our true strengths on 9/11 and in the days that followed. And we showed it after the awful Triangle Shirtwaist Fire as well. Today, we face new challenges in keeping workplaces safe. And that's why we're taking action. Since 2008, we've enacted 25 new laws to toughen safety standards at construction sites in our city, because we want the men and women who build New York's future to have bright and safe futures themselves. Today, there are new tests in living out America's ideals, and that's why we're taking action, battling for immigration reform that will open a pathway to citizenship for those who must now live in the shadows. In striving to meet new tests, we honor our true heritage. In drawing together as a community, we find our true strength. And by creating a safer and more humane city for all, we pay the greatest tribute possible to those who perished here. May God bless their memories.
The next speaker is Mary Bell, President of the Wisconsin Education Association. Mary was one of the great leaders who stood up against that monster governor in Wisconsin, attempting to roll back the rights of workers in Wisconsin the way these triangle workers had their rights rolled back. And so help me in welcoming a guest from Wisconsin, a teacher, Mary Bell, President of the Wisconsin Education Association.
Everything that we have gained in the workplace, from a living wage to healthy ventilation, bathroom breaks and safety rules, to those that prevent injury, disease, and death, all of these are the result of unions working on behalf of the people who are their members. Unions fought for these, and our current fight to preserve the voices of public workers in Wisconsin and Ohio and Indiana and all across this country is not so different. An ugly truth that became tragically clear to a nation the day of this fire. The workplace struggles for fair treatment put them in direct conflict with those who place profit above safety for their workers. The relationship of this dark past with the assault on workers today in my historically progressive state of Wisconsin makes me very worried. It is true that a new road, paved with the same disregard for the voice of workers, the same abuse of power, is that Wisconsin's legislature and so many others are now following. I fear the assault not only damages my profession, but drags my state back to a time when the voice of workers didn't matter, when employees were hands and bodies meant to work, but without question, without input, and without rights. The unchecked path for corporations to deliver profits and privatize, to move away what's good for people, is short-sighted, it is wrong, and we must not let it prevail.
It is upon us to take this moment as we support those who are in struggle now to define our world in the 21st century, to define a new relationship between labor and capital, to define a new relationship among us, to ask ourselves, what is it to be a human being here? Are we our brothers and our sisters keepers? That's the question that we ask here.
Every so often, a major event occurs that changes the course of history. This year, we mark the important anniversary of two such events. Triangle Shirtwaist Fire of 100 years ago, and in September, we will commemorate the 10th anniversary of September 11th,
2001. Before the Triangle Fire, the fire department focused mainly on putting out and extinguishing fires. After the Triangle Fire, we began to focus in earnest on preventing fires as well, and our efforts quickly paid off. In 6 months after the Triangle Fire, the number of fires went down from 43 a day to 36 a day. The first sudden and substantial drop in fires in the city's history. And then we started the Bureau of Fire Prevention, which in its almost 100 years has saved countless lives by ensuring safety standards in buildings throughout the city. Before the Triangle Fire, nobody had put much thought into things like emergency escape plans. After the Triangle Fire, the FDNY began a fire warden program in partnership with the International Labor and Garment Workers Union to train employees on how to act in case of a fire. That was the precursor to our current system, which requires building owners to have fire drills, emergency action plans, and other safety measures. Over the last century and a half, 1,141 New York City firefighters have given their lives to save others from the ravages of fire. These men, while without a doubt brave and selfless, were simply doing their job. In that sense, they are part of a long and simply proud tradition of American labor. As in the years past, we must guard against complacency. We must resist taking safety for granted. We must stand up for those who argue that in these modern times, we no longer need regulations to protect us. Because without these regulations, we know the toll that inevitably must be paid.
Tilly Cooper-Schmidt, 16.
Annie Levate, 16 years old.
Miguelina Nicolosi, 21.
Rose Learmark, 19 years old.
Albina Caruso, age 20. Bertha Greb, 25.
Mary Florissetta, 26. Calvin Donick, 24.
Myra Utah and Kate Leone, 14.
What does a day like this really mean to you?
Being here today is very significant because they believed in rights for workers and fair treatment for everyone.
Things that have changed are the laws that, thank God, are still there for safety, for workers' rights and so forth. But as you can see by our sign here, starting in Wisconsin and a lot of other places, they want to take away what this tragedy really began to earn. The fight after 100 years, yeah, we're a little bit better off, but we are losing ground. And what's unfortunate is that the heroes of today, some people look at the hedge fund heroes rather than the heroes of the labor movement and of the workers who, you know, everyday Americans who want the right to have representation to avoid this kind of tragedy. And that's why every year, I never miss it, I come here just to feel again the origins of what unions were for, how to improve workers, and how to stop these kind of tragedies as much as we can. And we'll be here forever. As long as greed is there, we'll have to be there to fight it.
Next on Italics News Briefs, we'll bring you stories on some of the events making news in our Italian-American community.
IAVANET, the Italian-American Visual Artists Network, have a group exhibition on display at the Calandra Institute Galleria from now through June 10th.
We feel that the great tradition of Italian excellence in the visual arts is alive in America, and by making our work visible, we're honoring and celebrating that continuum. I have this group of artists now who do all kinds of things.
The Calandra Institute hosts an interactive roundtable discussion with the artists of IAVANET on May 9th at 6 p.m. at the Institute in Midtown Manhattan.
Join us at the Calandra Institute on Friday, April 29th and Saturday, April 30th for our annual conference, The 3 F's in Italian Cultures, Critical Approaches to Food, Fashion, and Film. For more information, call 212-642-2094.
The Italian American Review is an academic journal, peer-reviewed, dedicated to the history and culture of Italian Americans. It includes a wide range of interdisciplinary essays that include history, cultural studies, art history, anthropology, and sociology, just to name a few disciplines. The most recent issue looks at a 19th century, early 20th century academically trained visual artist. It looks at the online culture of Guidos, and then looks at Woody Guthrie's recording from post-World War II of the Ballad of Sacco and Vanzetti. On June 10th, Friday evening, we will be having a benefit here at the Calandra Institute. We're very excited to have poet John Giordano and a musician, Vic Ruggiero, who will be performing that night. And it's a fundraiser. It's a $25 admission to the evening, and it'll go to help support the relaunching of the Italian American Review. And so we hope that all of you can make it at that time on June 10th.
Well, that's it for this edition of Italics. Again, thanks for watching. I'm Anthony Tamburri. See you next time. Arrivederci alla prossima puntata.
The sound of 146 keys. Yeah.